Well, welcome once again. This is to the City Bible Forum Summer School LSC. It's a privilege to have an international guest with us today. It's great to see so many people here today as well. So fantastic that you've come here. You've got up early in January in an otherwise sleepy kind of time to come out for a breakfast this morning. So we have David Robertson join us from Scotland. Our guest speaker today, David Robertson. It's a privilege to have David. David's the minister of St Peter's Free Church in Dundee in Scotland. He's also the director of the Solace Centre for Public Christianity, which makes him in some ways the Scottish equivalent of John Dixon. He's the author of Awakening, the Dawkins Letters, Magnificent Obsession, and Engaging with Atheists. He writes regularly for The Scotsman and Christianity Today. He blogs at The Wee Flea and regularly engages atheists. And you can check out some of his debates with prominent atheists such as Matt Dillahunty on the unbelievable podcast radio show with Justin Briley. He enjoys reading prolifically, playing chess and sampling fine whiskey. He's married to Annabelle, who's with us here this morning. We're delighted to have her as well with 3 children. Please welcome David Robertson.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me okay and that you understand my accent. I find it quite hard that everywhere we go in Australia, when people hear my wife, they go, "What a lovely accent you have," and nobody's ever said that to me. It's great to be in Melbourne. I've never been in Melbourne before, and I'm really glad that Andy Murray is going to be here longer than me. I look forward to his eventual triumph watching it from, at the moment it's -3 degrees in Scotland. Some of you have no concept of what that is, but that's quite cold. I also want to apologise for the way I'm dressed, because I don't have a kilt on, and I thought, well, you need to learn about Australia, so you kind of read Bill Bryson or you ask somebody who's been there once, and I was told everyone wears shorts and cowboy hats and dresses casually, so I can see that that's not true, and when we came down here we just brought one change of clothes with us, so but it's real, it really is good to be with you. This works a whole lot better. I know that you're all wide awake, but it works a whole lot better. I want to just introduce the topic and then feel free to ask questions. Now, I don't necessarily try and provoke people, but it happens quite a lot. So feel free, just any question or comment that you have, or you want to make any disagreement, we'll do that. I'm not going to speak for that long. I am a postmodern Presbyterian minister, which does mean that when you hear the word finally, it means nothing. I will try and keep it fairly brief. We've talked about this in terms of engaging with atheists, and an awful lot of people, it depends the culture and the context that you're in. We had a group from Mississippi, USA, come to our church. One time a man went out and he came back and he was so excited. I said, "What are you excited about?" He said, "I met me a real live atheist. I never met an atheist before." Well, when we talk about engaging with atheists, some of you will think of Richard Dawkins. He was here, Robert, when was he here? 2012, the Atheist Convention?
He was November last year.
Oh, he's in November last year. You had the World Atheist Convention in Melbourne. I really wish I'd been here for that one. It just kind of seems strange, because atheism is supposed to just simply be the belief that there is no God. It's not a positive belief. It's like having a convention about those who don't believe in the Loch Ness Monster, or the atheists will use the flying spaghetti, the non-believers in the flying spaghetti monster. And lots of atheists will say that, but people say, well, maybe I don't really know any atheists. But I want to just suggest that you do, and I want to talk a little bit about how we engage with the first group of people. I divide atheists into 4 different groups, and you can splinter all them as well. And the first group of people are just simply functional atheists. Now, what I mean by that are people who theoretically won't sit down and argue philosophy and won't sit down and argue whether there's a God or not, but they live their whole life as if there were no God. Hugo Grotius, a 17th century Dutch lawyer, wrote a very famous phrase. It's in Latin. My Latin's not great, but I think you pronounce it "Esti Deus non dabitur," as if God did not exist. And that's what secular means, as if God did not exist. So for the vast majority of people in Melbourne, I don't know this place and I'm not making an assumption. Well, I am making an assumption actually, but I think you can tell me if I'm wrong. The vast majority of people you will meet at work today are people who live as if God did not exist. If you ask them in theory, they might debate it, they might say, yes, I believe, and it can be all different kinds of beliefs, different religions, different versions of Christianity as well. But in reality, from the moment they get up in the morning to the moment they go to bed at night, they live their life no differently as if there were no God. And therefore I would argue that that's the majority of people that you meet and you work with. The second group though are what I call, and I shouldn't really call them this because they don't like it, but the new fundamentalist atheists. Now, our atheist friends, very often the more militant ones, try and talk about all Christians as though we're fundamentalists. Now, here's a classic example. The Sydney Morning Herald, which I apologise, I look at various Australian newspapers. I like to read it was the Sydney Morning Herald I eventually have gone with. If that's not your paper of choice, sorry. But I was fascinated. The day after Charlie Hebdo, it had a letters page in which one person wrote in and said, this is why we don't need Christian schools in Australia. Because there's a direct link between Islamists killing cartoonists in Paris and Anglicans educating children in Sydney or Melbourne. But that's the mentality that exists. I like playing chess, and when I first joined our local chess club, in Scotland, I don't know if, I'm sure it works here, people ask you first, what's your name? And then they ask you, what do you do for a living? And I told them my name's David. They said, what do you do? I said, I can't tell you, if I tell you I'll have to kill you. And so for 6 months, I didn't tell them what I did until they worked out, and this probably says more about my city of Dundee than it does about anything else. They said to me, you're either an undercover police detective or a drug dealer. So my witness probably hadn't been that effective. But I said, no, actually, I'm a Christian minister. And two of them immediately went, and I said, wrong sign, doesn't work with me. And they then started making jokes about if I was winning, oh, he's talking to the man upstairs, or there he goes with the bishop's move. And I said, you guys clearly don't understand Presbyterianism. But it was this instinctive reaction. Are you religious? I don't wear a dog collar. But if I wanted a seat on a train in Scotland, I would. Because, nobody come and sit near me, I'd get the whole table to myself. Unless it was some religious fanatic who did want to come and talk about the rapture or something like that, I don't know. But because there's this real suspicion of religious people. And the new fundamentalist atheists tapped into that. So Richard Dawkins' motto is ridicule, particularly Christians. It's good to be quite wary of ridiculing Muslims, but you certainly don't ridicule Mohammed, but ridicule Christians, ridicule the whole thing, and also imply that all religious people are the same. I often do kind of cafe discussions and so on, and go to bookshops, and sometimes I'll say something like, the atheists say we don't fly planes into buildings. And I was in Glasgow once, and this man shouted out, aye, so we don't. And I said, yes, but neither do Presbyterians, nor Baptists, nor even Charismatics. No, they don't. They don't fly planes into buildings. But that's the common association. I'm not sure how your newspapers here report it, but if there's a terrorist act by Islamists, it's portrayed religious terrorist, religious violence. People don't want to name a specific, and so we're all kind of automatically associated. And the new fundamentalist atheists, there's that kind of ridicule. How do you deal with that? Now, one of the things that came out of the kind of earlier atheism of was much more different. Jean-Paul Sartre, particularly Bertrand Russell, which is hugely significant. Russell, his essay, Why I Am Not a Christian, we actually wrote, Solas, a group of us, different people from different backgrounds, psychiatrist, business person, minister, educationalist, and so on. We wrote, scientist, we wrote a collection of essays entitled Why I'm Not an Atheist, largely as a response to Bertrand Russell's About 70 Years Too Late. But Russell himself was a much more kind of gentle approach, because they believed absolutely that human beings were progressing and that religion would just die out. Like the association in modern, urbane Melbourne amongst young people will be, why would you be religious? You know, that's for rednecks, so I don't know what your equivalent is here, bogans or something. You know, but that's for people who are up in the country, who are a bit thick, and older people who've not advanced and progressed as much as we have. And so there's a kind of almost snobbery and elitism. And if you're intelligent, you'll be... I once had a debate with somebody. This is a genuine debate. We were talking about doing online stuff. I once had a genuine debate with someone on the Richard Dawkins website. He said, I'd like to have an intelligent discussion with you, but I can't. And I said, why not? There was an obvious rejoinder, but I didn't want to make it. And I said, why can't you have an intelligent discussion? He said, because intelligent people don't believe in God. Therefore, if you believe in God, you cannot be intelligent. Therefore, it's impossible to have an intelligent discussion. I said, that's a circular argument. He just said, no, it's the truth. Oh. What can you do? It's all right. See, most of your workmates, I think, will think it's okay for you to be religious as long as you keep it to yourself. It's like being a Kylie Minogue fan, or a member of a Star Trek club, or what you do in private. You have a breakfast like this, that's fine, but just don't let it have any impact on anything in public life. It's the privatization of religion. It's the, you can join the knitting club if you want, but you can't have a public profession of Christianity. Keep it to yourself. It's kind of weird. It's almost, dare I use this phrase, it's like a spiritual fetish. That's fine. What you do behind your own closed doors or in your own clubs is fine, but in public life, forget it. And that's where the new fundamentalist atheists have come in. Third group, agnostic atheists. Agnostic is just simply, of course, atheist is a non-theist, don't believe in God. An agnostic, don't, gnostic, knowledge, I don't know. Now, I think that's where most people are at. They'll say, I don't know, but there are two kinds of agnosticism. One is an intelligent one and one's a stupid one. And I always ask people, what would you prefer to be? And I illustrate it this way. I like football. Now, I apologise, I have no idea what Australian football is, really. I've watched it once and it seemed the strangest sport. I love cricket, but I like soccer. And my home team is Dundee, and they're useless. It's like driving around in a battered old, I don't know, Ford Fiesta or something, and having a sticker on the back that says, my other team is Barcelona. Or my other car's a Porsche. So my other team is Barcelona. So I want you to imagine, I'm sitting watching Barcelona beating Real Madrid. Actually, no, let's make it local. Australian Open. Couple of Sundays time, Andy Murray is in the final against Djokovic, and he's winning 6-love, 6-love, 5-love, and I can dream. And there's a knock on the door, and you come to my door and you say, excuse me, did you realise that your house is on fire? Did you know that your house is on fire? And I go, no, I'm agnostic. I don't know. And a stupid agnostic goes, I don't know and I don't care because I'm watching the tennis and it's really important and Andy Murray is about to win the Australian Open. Go away. An intelligent agnostic goes, no, I don't know and you look really suspicious and I'm not sure about you, but if my house burns down on top of me, especially when I'm in it, then that's a big deal, so I'll just go and have a little look. I'll just have a wee look and see. When most people go, I'm an agnostic, what they usually mean is, I don't know, nobody can know, I don't care. What we have to try and do is stimulate interest to say, actually, it is possible to know. And that comes back to why Jesus came and so on. But one of the things that will change people's minds in that aspect is if they see that you do know, not because you wear a big t-shirt. I was speaking about clothes. I once spoke in a cafe in Chelmsford in England, and a man stood up at the end when it was time for questions, and he opened his jacket like that, and there was a big A for atheist. I asked him, is that in case you forget what you are? It's like, but you don't need to wear a t-shirt to work saying, Jesus Christ, he's the real thing. You really don't need to do that. You don't need to go into a restaurant with a big black Bible with your workmates and plonk it on the table so that they know that you're a Christian. There should be something in how you behave, the way that you think, the way that you interact. Why? Why are you like that? And I think when people see that it's for real for you, then it makes a huge difference. I've met atheists who, when we've discussed and talked, they've said, look, David, you're really freaking me out. Because I know that you're wrong, but you seem an intelligent guy, and you seem quite a nice guy, and yet you believe all this rubbish that's so evil. And it really does cause people to question and think. So we're dealing with agnostic atheists. Last one is, we're dealing with Christian atheists, which sounds a bit of an oxymoron. But I'm going back to the functional thing. There's an old joke about the religious troubles in Northern Ireland, where a man was approached and was asked, are you Protestant or Catholic? And he goes, no, I'm an atheist. Yes, but you are a Protestant atheist or a Catholic atheist. And in actual fact, Richard Dawkins would describe himself as an Anglican atheist. There are more than a few of those. I apologise if you are Anglican, but there are Baptist atheists too. There are people who kind of go along to church, but for many different reasons, they don't actually themselves have a knowledge of or a living relationship with Jesus Christ. And so some of the people you're going to do is dealing with that. I just want to say something very briefly about how we engage with each of those. Or maybe I should just list. I've got a book here, Engaging with Atheists. So a lot of this you can get in this book. I'll leave a copy with the City Bible Forum, and they can tell you where you can get it. It's the Good Book Company. Do you have that here yet? Yeah. Pretty well. I'm pretty sure you do. Amazon's everywhere anyway. This is what atheists believe. I'm just going to list these and then we can discuss. Atheism is not a belief or faith. That would be the argument. I would argue, of course, it is. If God did exist, if he's the God of the Bible, he's an ogre. Atheism is the default position of humanity. They object very strongly to children being called Christian children or Buddhist children. What are atheists? They'll say, well, that's the default position. Actually, scientifically it isn't, but you can ask her that if you wish. Atheism, agnosticism, is the default position of intelligent, open-minded and tolerant people. So asking if you're religious for some people is the equivalent of asking, are you an idiot? And it's just, that's the mentality. Atheism is the scientific position. It's fascinating, that one. Atheism is based on reason. Atheism sets people free. Atheism is the progressive position for society. All politicians want to be progressive. Some atheists do bad things, but this is in spite of, rather than because of, their atheism. Human beings are fundamentally good, and they certainly don't need a saviour. Sometimes life just sucks, and we just have to get on with it. And we're on the road to nowhere. What atheists believe about Christianity is a belief that's equivalent to a fairy story. It is based on faith, which is defined as belief without or contrary to the evidence. Yeah. The Bible is a primitive book written by illiterate desert shepherds who reflect the horrendous morality of their barbaric culture, to which my logical... Do you know there's a philosophical position called Scottish common sense? I hold to that. Scottish common sense philosophical position means if it waddles like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, if it swims like a duck, then it's probably a duck. Well, my Scottish common sense position goes, how do illiterate people write the Bible? How do they write if they're illiterate? Especially when you read something like John chapter 1 or the poetry of Job or whatever. Number 3, Christians only believe because of their parents or predominant culture. Number 4, Christians are intolerant, bigoted fanatics and a bit dumb. Number 5, Christians in the church are anti-science. Number 6, Christianity is based on revelation, not reason. Number 7, Christians are trapped, repressed and need to be set free. Number 8, Christianity is the regressive position for society, a return to the Dark Ages. Number 9, some Christians do good things, but it's in spite of, rather than because of, their Christianity. Religion in general, and Christianity in particular, is the root cause of all evil. Always interesting having a conversation with an absolute atheist who talks about something being evil. Please define evil for me. What do you mean by evil? It's very difficult for them. Jesus is unnecessary. He was a good guy if he existed, but the church has corrupted him. Suffering proves that the God of the Bible does not exist. The Christian belief in the afterlife is pie in the sky when you die, and results in Christians wasting their lives and other people's on this earth. Just before we finish, I'll give you a list of things I think that we can do in terms of interacting, some basic principles. But that's kind of where I'm coming from, and I'm quite happy, basically there's every subject under the sun in there. So I'm quite happy for you to make any comment or ask any question if you'd like. And if not, as I said, I'm a Scottish Presbyterian minister. That's my first point. I'm quite happy to keep going until your work is over and done.
I have a question. What happens when you present them with the evidence for the resurrection? What happens in their mind?
Yeah, the evidence for the resurrection, it becomes a circular argument because, what happens when presented with the evidence for the resurrection? What happens in their mind? The key thing there is the way that people think. So, their default position is miracles do not happen. And that any evidence that's presented for any, what could be called a miracle, must de facto be false. It's a bit like arguing with a conspiracy theorist. I don't know if you've ever done that, but it doesn't matter. If you believe that the American government blew up the towers in 9/11, no matter what is said, people go, well, you would say that, that's part of the conspiracy. So the evidence for the resurrection, you can get a classic old book like Who Moved the Stone. They will just always come round to finding some way to fall. If you are determined not to accept something, you won't accept it. I do think the evidence for the resurrection is very, very, very strong. I'm a historian. That's my training. I did history at university, and I think historically the evidence is really strong. We can't provide evidence for Jesus died for our sins. That's a theological position that you accept because it's been taught. But I think historically you can present a lot of evidence for the resurrection. But if you want to, you can find a way around that. So normally it's deflated. People just assume miracles do not. Whatever happened, this was not a miracle. So you probably have to go back even a step further. My argument in terms of the miracles, I wrote a book called Magnificent Obsession about Jesus. And one of the chapters was Jesus doing miracles. And G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis are by far the best people on this. They just simply state that the narrow atheist has a doctrinal position that miracles do not and cannot happen. What you have to try and get them to do is to say, look, just allow a possibility for the moment. If there was an almighty God, could he logically do something that was out with natural laws? And the logical position is yes, he could. If you get them to accept that, then you can talk about evidence. If they don't accept that, it's a circular argument all the time. But it's a great question, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. I've got a friend who, because of her family background, hates the idea of God.
Yeah.
And she actually said, if you mention God, I'll ask you to leave the house.
Yeah.
So how would you handle someone like that? And what category would you put her in?
Yeah. A friend, just repeat the question, a friend who actually hates the idea of God because of her family background and basically has said to you, if you leave the house, if you mention God, then you're leaving the house. So what category would you put her in? A new one. Because, first of all, that's very, very handy if you do want to leave. And not be impolite, Just say, do you mind if we just pray? Okay, I'm gone. But secondly, most of what I would call the new fundamentalist atheists are not that because of the brain. It's not a rational position, first of all. It is an emotional position. I couldn't believe this. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was speaking in Cambridge, and I mentioned this. It was in a bookstore, and I mentioned how I was so shocked that the new atheists were so emotional. When I wrote a thing called the Dawkins Letters, I can't believe the stuff that was written on it. The new atheist. Robertson is a prat, and not only a prat, but a dangerous prat. I don't know if that translates into Australian, but there you get the kind of tone. People just having a real go. And I was saying, why the emotion? Why the hatred? The motto of the new fundamentalist atheist is there is no God, and I hate him. To which, back comes my Scottish common sense and go, why do you waste time? I don't hate the Loch Ness Monster. Why do you do that? And I think the answer to that, so the category I put your friend in would be an emotional atheist, who, what you have to do with that is understand absolutely why she hates the idea of God. Because you've got, in a sense, you've almost got to ask for me, asking questions comes all the time. You've got to, why are you so emotionally strong about this? What happened to you? Sometimes someone will say to me, I'm an atheist, and I say, what does that mean? They say, I don't believe in God. And I say, okay, tell me about this God you don't believe in. They go, all right, so tell me about the God you don't believe in. I say, well, I don't believe in a God who does this, a God who does that. That's amazing, neither do I. Now let me tell you about the God I do believe in. So I think that when someone's got that kind of emotional reaction, it's they're really hurt, it's a really sore point, you do not want to stick your finger into that wound. But that's where the gentleness and trying to just ask, what is this about? What is this about? And sometimes I would say, okay, I'm not going to mention God at all. But it's impossible, for me anyway, it's impossible to have any subject. They say like, every one of us is linked. You do 6 links, we're all linked to each other in some way or other. We can find a connection. I think that any subject, there's a connection. For me, it always comes back to Jesus Christ, actually. And as you go deeper into a relationship, bit by bit, they will reveal more and more. And also, I think the key thing for her will be to see that for you, it is real, and it's not screwed up your head, and you're not a very damaged and dangerous person because of your belief in God. So there's a sense, there's a prejudice that's been caused by experience. And I think if you had the same experience, maybe you'd have the same prejudice. And that's probably a good place to begin. Yes, sir.
I got excited when you said you were historian.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to comments? You see this online and what people say about religions that cause world wars, and then people say, look at what happened in Northern Ireland or whatever else, and then you say, well, what about what's happened in the 20th century with Pol Pot? And they say, oh, Pol Pot, he may be an atheist, but that's not what motivates him. It's sort of like, well, maybe that's not what motivated. It just, there seems like a circular logic that I don't get. And then you get this huge debate about whether Hitler was a Christian, which I find exceedingly odd debate. I'd be interested in your sort of perspective on how to deal with that or think about it.
Now, one of the things you've got to be aware of is depends who you're dealing with. And I would say, please, Christians, don't be like this. A lot of the more fundamentalist atheists I know, they've basically just got a few facts off the internet. And it's always the same thing. It's always the same 5 Bible passages they quote. It's always the same quotes from Hitler. It's always... And I always go, did you read Mein Kampf? And they go, no. I said, well, I have.
Yeah, I actually did. I read through Mein Kampf and actually searched the Christ.
Yeah.
And it was quite interesting because it was basically saying, oh, Christians have got it all wrong. It's all about racial purity.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's sort of like...
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, Hitler hated the Jews and Jesus was a Jew. So, use your logic. He never went to church. He never read the Bible. All this kind of stuff. But the trouble is, with that kind of thing, the minute... I just simply say to people, well, as a historian, first rule, go to primary sources. Second rule, start thinking for yourself. Don't just take what you get off the internet. And then let's work it out. Let's use logic as well. So, always concede something. And I would concede this, absolutely. I'd say religion does a huge amount of harm. Do you know the Bible attacks religion much more than it does atheism? Atheism is rarely mentioned in the Bible. It is by implication and directly in a few places. But it's false religion. And religion is used to abuse and to distort people. Why? Now, I would always ask questions about that. I would say, why has there never been a culture in this world where there hasn't been religion? Why? And what happens when you throw religion out of a society? Let's look at the only atheistic societies that have ever been in human history. And I'm sorry, but that is North Korea, Kampuchea, Stalin's Russia, Mao's China, Albania. Okay, no, what about Sweden? Sweden had a state church until the year 2000s. All the countries that people name as the countries they would like to live in as the most liberal and democratic, all of them actually, with the exception of Singapore, and that's arguable, come from actually a Protestant tradition, not even just generally Christian. And I find that fascinating. So I think, for me, the evidence on that is overwhelming. The other logical thing is simply this. How many people in Melbourne tonight will be beaten up because of religion? Probably not that many. How many will be beaten up because of money? How many will be beaten up because of sex? Wow, much more. So let's ban money. That's most of you at work. let's ban sex. Well, nobody's going to argue like that. So the position that they're using is a very simplistic, very fundamentalist, very irrational position, which you just can't come back with a one-off answer. You have to say, I think we need to look at this a little bit more deeply, but that just doesn't ring true. When you know your history, and history for me is an immensely powerful one. Our atheists, and again, this is happening in Australia as well, I'm certain of this, they're thinking, if only we could get rid of the shackles of religion. In fact, in the Sydney Morning Herald, there was a letter where the woman said, the Charlie Hebdo thing shows us that if we were all humanists, then the world would be wonderful. You really, really believe that? Everything's going to be fine. There was an atheist bus slogan, I'm sure it was here as well, because Dawkins was here, that was started in London, and I did a debate with the woman who initiated it. And I thanked her for £250,000 worth of free publicity, because they'd put on the bus, there's probably no God. It's a bit like the Carlsberg beer advert. There's probably no God, so cheer up and enjoy life. And you go, yeah, right. So you're a mum who's just lost her son. There's probably no God, cheer up and enjoy life. What kind of message is that? So my argument would be that atheism just doesn't work. It doesn't make sense rationally, but historically and currently, it just doesn't work. And yes, religion has done so much harm, and I'm not going to defend all religions, and I'm not even going to defend all Christians or all that's been done in the name of Christianity. And I'm going to say to someone, listen, if you want to meet a screwed up person, have a look at me. Because what the Bible says about me is, the tagline for my church is, for me anyway, is we're a bunch of screwed up people in a screwed up world with a great Savior. And I think, that question, I wouldn't just dismiss it. I would say, you serious? You really want to talk about this? Then sure, let's read. I was asked, again, it's another book show. This young man stood up, and his father was an atheist, and he was an atheist, but I think he was beginning to waver. His father was a bit annoyed at him. He said, David, you make a lot of sense, but he said, I don't get you. There's just one thing. You seem to have a very low view of human beings. And I said, well, no, I don't. I have a very high view. We're made in God's image. He says, but you think everything, we've all got bad. I said, yes. Can you prove that? I said, absolutely. It's a book show. There's the history section. Choose me any book you like. And it will show you that humanity's screwed up. Any book you like, unless it's written by Disney. Anyone else? Yeah.
David, you said earlier, for me it all comes back to Jesus Christ. And I'd like to place before you John 14:6. No man comes to the Father except through me. And also Peter in Acts saying, there is no other name under heaven whereby men must be saved. A very crude way of putting that would be to say that we Christians are right and everybody else is wrong. In your public discourse, how do you convey that truth that we're right and they're wrong without sounding arrogant, offensive, insulting and narrow-minded?
Do I need to repeat that question, or you heard
Did anybody hear it?
Everyone heard it. You got it. Okay, good.
I think you're right next to the microphone.
Yeah, so you're okay.
Where's the radio?
Well, this is my wife Annabelle, and sometimes, occasionally, we might talk about things, and Annabelle might say to me, "You always think you're right." To which I go, "Homer Simpson, duh, of course. Why would I say it if I thought I wasn't right?" Well, there's an arrogance in that, isn't there? And I know myself that I think very quickly on my feet. So people asking questions, and it sounds like I've got an answer for everything. And actually, that's not very attractive. It does sound very arrogant. But I think as I've gone on as a Christian, the more I realise, whoa, there's a whole ocean of knowledge out there, and I've just dipped my toe in it. And there's so much that I don't know. And I actually think it's a really important thing for you that you're able to say to your non-Christian friends, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Your question. I'm sorry, I just don't know enough about history. But I know someone who does. And I think what we're doing there is, in that question, in your question, which I'm coming to answer, I'm not trying to avoid it, is all the time we're not pointing to ourselves as being the fount of all knowledge, or having a philosophical system which is better than anybody else's, or a way of life which is better than anybody else's, because I actually find I know some atheists who live a better life than many people who profess to be Christians. people I really like and really admire, and it screws with your head and your heart when you start thinking about that. But I just simply say, it's Dick Lucas in London who keeps saying this, we always are giving people a person as the truth. Jesus said, I am the truth. Now, I'm not the truth, and I get things wrong, and lots of things I don't understand. And I think it's very important when you're communicating with people that you're not saying to them, or implying that you know it all, or that your church knows it all. And I think just as valid, an awful lot of Christians will sometimes think, well, personal testimony, that's the way. But the trouble is, to a non-Christian, personal testimony sounds like, I used to be a really, really bad person. You know, I went around murdering nuns with axes and did all kinds of things. And then I met Jesus and now I'm perfect. And they look at you and they go, it sounds to them as though you're saying, you can become like me. And they're going, I don't want to be like you, I don't even like you. So it's not really an attractive proposition. Whereas I think Christ is the attractive proposition. And so all the time you're pointing towards Christ, and I think you're saying, please don't look at me. You know, it's like doing good deeds in order to impress someone in your witness. That is insanely wrong, because it's just so self-righteous. You should do good deeds because you're following Christ's example, and you'll love somebody whether they become a Christian or not. It's why I have this whole idea of friendship evangelism. I hate it, because you should be friends with people because you like people,
Yes.
not because you're trying to bring them. You know, I was in a Highland village called Brora. A friend up there, Craig Mackay, is an art photographer. Known him for 25 years. He's still not a believer. I'm not going to say right when he writes me, no, I'm not talking to you anymore because you've had plenty of chance. You know, I've got to focus on other people. You know, you love what you pray for. So I think it's back to pointing people towards Jesus and not setting yourself or your organization or your church or your experience up as the default, this is what you all want to be. It's rather saying, I know a man who does. I don't know the answer. I know a man who does. And it's therefore always pointing to Christ. And that is actually quite difficult. Now, Christ should be reflected in you. That's true. But you really want people to say, why are you so different? Because, to be honest, you're a bit of a weirdo, but there's something about you. And it really should be, there's someone. You're pointing them to someone.
Yeah, amen.
Anyone else?
Yeah, are you using the moral argument, the theological argument, the cosmological? Which one works best for you?
Am I using the moral argument, theological argument, the cosmological? The lot. The lot. Please don't compartmentalize. I'm using the mercy ministry argument. I'm using I'm using all the Bible's arguments. I'm using the Bible and so on. The moral argument is a great argument purely and simply because when someone says, I don't believe in God because the God of the Old Testament is evil, I say, what categories are you using? The trouble is, you're like C.S. Lewis. In order to blame God, you first of all have to believe in the God of the Bible in order to blame him. In order to say he doesn't exist. So the moral argument is a huge one. Francis Collins, the head of the Human Genome Project, was an atheist, was converted not through the Human Genome Project, but through reading C.S. Lewis on the moral argument. So the moral argument, the cosmological, I never use the argument about evolution and stuff, because to me that tends to be an in-house Christian one. And it also tends to be the one Richard Dawkins goes, point one, evolution is true. Point two, because evolution is true, there's no God. That logically doesn't follow. So I always just say, right, I'll give you evolution, that's fine now. Why does, you know, but the cosmological is much more important. The biggest question in the world is, why is there anything at all? And the second biggest question is, how come the universe doesn't implode? Because it shouldn't exist. And then why am I here? All these massive big questions. And ultimately atheism, the only answer atheism has is Lawrence Krauss, which is, there was nothing and nothing created everything. And you go, yeah, duh. Why not do Disney? You know, I mean, it doesn't make any sense logically. Oh, by nothing, I don't mean nothing. I mean, there was gravity. Oh, but I thought you said there was nothing. You know, and so, but atheism just says it's cold, it's dead, it's, you know, Bertrand Russell again. We are a blob of carbon floating from one meaningless existence to another. If you're a blob of carbon, I flick you, I kill you. So what? I'm just rearranging molecules in the universe. And ultimately, Dawkins is consistent. But virtually nobody else, except he's not consistent in how he lives, he doesn't live like that. But nobody else who's an atheist is consistent in their absolutist belief if it's just materialism. If it's just materialism and just chemicals, you cannot live as a human being like that. So I would use all the arguments. Every single one, I'd use anything.
Have you seen atheists coming to Christ?
Yes, have I seen atheists coming to Christ? In fact, the Dawkins Letters, if you've got the latest edition, there's a whole chapter we gave of a man called Richard Morgan, who's fascinating because I liked Richard. He used to write on the Richard Dawkins website dozens of messages attacking me, and he's a musician, and he even wrote a piece of music called The Wee Flea, which is, I've never had a piece of music written about me yet, and it was a classical piece. And it's a bizarre story, and I won't tell you the story because our time's limited, but he was converted through his own piece of music. And he now writes praise music for a church in France. But yes, of course, there are, it's always implied, there are lots of religious people who become atheists. That's true. But let me tell you this, there are lots of atheists who become Christians. C.S. Lewis, Alistair McGrath, John Lennox, numerous people who have been atheists, who have been converted. And that's why you should never give up on any of your friends, purely and simply because of this. Because it's the Holy Spirit who's at work. Not you. It's not your arguments, not your brilliance. Can I just finish off with just giving you a list of 10 basic principles, and if you want them in more detail, you can get it here, or email me and I'll send them to you. I realise that you do have to go to work. You're not like me, a minister, just wander free and at leisure for most of the week. But I'll list the principles. Number 1, listen and learn. Huge point in terms of communicating with people. You've got to listen. What are people actually saying? When someone asks about suffering, are they making a philosophical point because they've read Bertrand Russell, or has their mother just died? Two very different things. So listen and learn. Number 2, question all the time. Keep questioning. Why are you asking this? What do you mean by this? Because you're trying to understand. Number 3, I would say this: read. I just think if you read stuff, it really, really, really is. And read broadly, not just the latest Christian how-to book. But read what people are actually reading. Number 4, communicate. You've got to communicate with people, and for me it's about communicating who Jesus Christ is. I used to have a poster on my wall that said, you can't talk to people about Jesus unless you're talking to people. If the first time you've ever spoken to a colleague is to say, would you like to come to church with me? You've never ever spoken to them before. That's just weird. Number 5, you begin where people are, not where you'd like them to be or where you think they are. Number 6, you've got to love people. If you don't love people, if you're kind of like even atheists, I'm going to get them, I'm going to slaughter them. That's no. Number 7, you've got to pray, of course. Have a list of people, maybe 5 or 6 people that you regularly pray for. You'll be amazed how that answers. Number 8, use the Bible. Know your Bible and use the Bible. Not quoting as it says in the Bible. But Richard Morgan, for example, said afterwards, when I read through all David Robertson's responses to mine, it struck me that it was the Word of God, not the Word of David Robertson. Well, when I quoted God is love, I didn't put the verse after it because it wasn't a Bible class. But I hope it's biblical what we're saying. Number 9, in the words of Frozen, if any of you have children, you'll know this, let it go. Leave it. Leave it. Don't keep nagging. Just let it go. Sometimes say, okay, I'm backing off here, but, and let God work. And number 10 is just very simple. Do it together. Do it in community. Don't do it on your own. None of us are mega evangelists. We all need one another. And thank you for your patience, and I hope that you'll be able to communicate and share what is, I hope, all our magnificent obsession, which is Jesus Christ. Thank you. Please, thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, David. It was fantastic. Great reminder, I think, about engaging our culture, engaging atheists, but also reminding us of engaging with Jesus, who is much greater than any of us, no matter how good our arguments may be.